I want you to picture something for a second. Think about a time you stood in front of a massive ancient monument.
Oh, like on a vacation or something.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe you were staring down an endless canal or running your hand along this perfectly cut giant stone block at a historical site.
Right.
And I want to know, did you ever have that fleeting, kind of quiet thought like, wait, this is just too big. Like, this shouldn't have been possible to build back then.
It's that jarring moment of cognitive dissonance, you know?
Yes?
You're reading the little bronze plaque that confidently states the structure was built with copper chisels and wooden sleds, but your eyes are looking at a logistical reality that would give a modern multinational engineering firm a collective panic attack.
Exactly. And usually we just nod, take our picture, and move on to the gift shop. But today we're doing a deep dive into the alternative history of the Tartaria civilization, all based on this massive stack of sources you've brought in.
Right, and specifically, we're focusing on a concept these texts call impossible engineering.
And our mission today is a bit different. We aren't just going to debate the classic historical who'd it like, the who built these structures.
No, we're going to dig into a far more complex and frankly fascinating question posed by our source material. How did they build them?
Right, the how.
Because when you really scrutinize the logistics, the caloric requirements, the materials, the conventional explanations we all learned in school start to look incredibly strained.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We are going to look at these sources with a really critical eye, as just everyday people. We're dropping the academic jargon. We're just going to do some basic math and apply some common sense physics to see if the mainstream historical narrative actually adds up.
And to understand how a massive, highly advanced civilization theoretically functions, our sources suggest we have to start with its lifeblood.
Which is water.
Right, water. The underlying premise here is that before you can build giant megalithic structures, you have to master the landscape on a macro level. You have to control the veins of your empire.
Which means we need to look at canals. And let's start with the Erie Canal right here in the U.S. Our sources lay out some numbers regarding its construction that honestly made me stop reading and pull out a calculator.
The math is pretty wild.
It's insane. So the Erie Canal is 363 miles long. The official history says it was built in just 8 years, between 1817 and 1825.
Which, on the surface, sounds like a perfectly reasonable timeline for the 19th century, until you break down the daily, grueling reality of that construction.
Right. If you do the math, excavating 363 miles in 8 years equals digging about 1 mile of navigable canal every 8 days.
Every 8 days.
And we have to remember the context here. Dynamite wasn't even invented until 1867.
So they're doing this decades before high explosives were even available.
Exactly. They're cutting through solid limestone cliffs at the Niagara Escarpment. They're digging up massive ancient tree stumps, dealing with water table flooding, and building 30 massive aqueducts.
And they are allegedly doing all of this using only Irish laborers, hand tools, and oxen.
It's like trying to dig a neighborhood swimming pool over a weekend, using only a spoon.
That's actually a great analogy. The caloric and logistical reality of that is just staggering. I mean, how do you feed, house, and supply a workforce capable of moving that much earth by hand at that speed through an untamed wilderness?
You really can't.
But the detail from the source that really highlights the absurdity here is the leadership. This entire continent-altering project was supposedly overseen by 2 local judges.
Wait, judges?
Yes, 2 judges who possessed 0 prior civil engineering experience.
So we're supposed to believe 2 guys with law degrees coordinated a project that defies the basic physics of manual labor.
According to the mainstream timeline, yes.
It forces us to ask, if we follow the logic laid out in these texts, what are we actually looking at? Are we looking at the construction of a new canal or the excavation of an existing one?
Right, were they building it or just unearthing it?
And this scale isn't isolated. You mentioned the Grand Canal in China from the sources earlier. The numbers there are even more staggering.
Oh, absolutely. It is 1,795 kilometers long. That is longer than the Suez and the Panama Canals combined.
Wow.
Yeah, featuring 24 locks and over 60 bridges. And again, the mainstream story asks us to accept that it was dug out with basic hand chisels, baskets, and shovels.
It's just so hard to wrap my head around.
But what's really fascinating here is the alternative mechanism our sources offer. The Tartaria theory suggests that these massive waterways weren't just designed designed for floating barges of grain from point A to point B, the source material posits that they were actually energy reservoirs.
Okay, wait, let's pause right there. Energy reservoirs. How exactly does a giant ditch of still water generate or store energy?
Well, the theory detailed in the text is that these civilizations understood Earth sciences in a way we've completely forgotten. They utilized telluric currents.
Telluric currents, what is that?
They're basically natural electrical currents that move underground. The idea is that these massive, perfectly straight canals were designed with specific geometries and filled with highly mineralized water, which acts as an incredible conductor. So in this view, a sprawling empire like Tartaria was utilizing the landscape itself to harvest and distribute geomagnetic energy.
So instead of just a watery highway, they're describing a massive planetary circuit board.
Exactly.
But think about the implications of that for a second. If a civilization goes to the trouble of turning its entire geographical waterways into a sprawling, highly valuable energy grid, they suddenly have a massive asset to protect.
Yes, they do.
They have to draw hard boundaries, not just to keep people out, but to enclose and control that circuit.
And that mastery of water inevitably leads to the strict control of land, which brings us to the most famous boundary line on Earth, the Great Wall of China.
Right, and the textbook explanation we've all been taught is that it was built over centuries as a strict military defense structure to keep out northern nomads.
But our sources point out several glaring logistical issues with that narrative. First, let's talk about the physical reality of the Great Wall.
Yeah, let's look at it.
In many places, it's actually pretty easily climbed. It's not a sheer, unscalable cliff. Second, and more importantly, it's roughly 4,000 kilometers long.
Which is just massive.
Think about the sheer caloric logistics of staffing a 4,000-kilometer security fence in a pre-industrial era. It is a logistical nightmare.
Yeah, you'd need so many people.
Exactly. To effectively defend a wall that long against a mobile cavalry force, you would need millions of soldiers stationed constantly. How do you supply them with food, water, and weapons across remote mountainous terrain without motorized transport?
Right. No trucks, no trains.
The supply chains alone would bankrupt an empire.
And then there are the historical omissions the sources bring up, which I found totally bizarre when I read them.
That Marco Polo thing.
Yes. So Marco Polo documented 13th and 14th century Asia in obsessive granular detail. He wrote about the local diets, the roads, the paper money, the layout of the cities.
And yet he never mentioned the Great Wall. Not once.
How does that even happen?
It doesn't make sense. How do you travel extensively across Asia, document the minute details of the culture, and somehow fail to mention the largest continuous artificial structure on the face of the Earth?
You don't. Unless, according to these sources, it wasn't there yet, or at least wasn't there in the form we are told. The text also notes that the Great Wall didn't even appear on European world maps until the late 1600s.
Which is centuries later.
So if it wasn't an ancient defense against nomads, what do these alternative texts claim it actually was?
According to the Tartaria theory, the wall was likely built much later, around the 16th or 17th century, and its primary function wasn't a military barricade to repel invaders, it was a border demarcation.
Just a line on a map. Well, a physical line.
Right, a physical, undeniable boundary line between China and the sprawling Mongol Tartaria Empire to the north, a region sometimes referred to in the texts as the Russia Horde.
But wait, if it's just a border demarcation built between two empires, who actually built it? Because the source highlights an architectural detail here that kind of flips the whole script.
Yes, the tactical openings.
If you look closely at the Great Wall, specifically the tactical openings, like the peepholes and the defensive slots where you would shoot an arrow or fire a weapon, they face north. They face towards Tartaria.
Which, from a conventional military standpoint, is a complete inversion of the accepted narrative.
Right. If you build a security fence to keep intruders out, why would you put the tactical openings on the intruder side? You'd be giving the invading army the defensive advantage.
It would be strategic suicide.
But let me play devil's advocate for a second. Couldn't the Chinese have just captured an older wall built by someone else and maybe retrofitted the peepholes later?
That's a logical question, but the structural analysis in the sources actually argues against it. These tactical openings aren't roughly punched through existing stone.
Oh, they're not.
No, they are seamlessly integrated into the original masonry and brickwork. The architecture itself faces north. The implication the sources are driving at is that the wall was built by the empire on the north side, Tartaria, to keep the people on the south side out.
Wow. Which suggests an empire in the north that possess the unbelievable resources and industrial capacity to draw a 4,000-kilometer line in the sand just to mark its territory.
Exactly.
And if you're building a boundary line that massive, you aren't just moving Earth anymore. You are dealing with millions of tons of the heaviest, most stubborn materials on Earth. You have to master stone.
And this shift from moving dirt to shaping megalithic rock is where the math in our sources goes from highly improbable to almost physically impossible under the mainstream timeline.
Yeah, the numbers just fall apart.
Take the Great Pyramid of Egypt, for instance. The source highlights the 8,000 tons of solid granite used in its inner construction. We know that granite was quarried in Aswan, which is 500 miles away.
Okay, let's just think about that for you listening.
Yeah.
Moving 8,000 tons of anything 500 miles today requires a dedicated fleet of diesel freight trains.
Right.
To suggest it was done with wooden rollers sinking into the sand and hemp ropes that would just snap under the sheer tension. It's really hard to swallow.
It is. But the pyramids are mostly just about moving weight. The Serapeum tombs in Egypt are where the sources focus on the actual manipulation of the stone.
Ah, yeah, those giant boxes.
Yes, the Serapeum of Saqqara. These are subterranean galleries housing massive granite boxes. Each box weighs roughly 100 tons.
100 tons.
But the weight isn't even the anomaly that baffles modern stonemasons, it's the execution. The interior and exterior surfaces of these massive granite boxes are so perfectly smooth, and the angles are so incredibly square that the margin of error is less than 110,000th of an inch.
So what does this all mean? Let's put that in perspective. 110,000th of an inch is significantly thinner than a single human hair.
It's microscopic precision.
And remember, these boxes are sitting in tight underground tunnels. You can't even fit enough laborers around the box to pull a rope, let alone swing a heavy tool.
Exactly.
Furthermore, our sources point out there are 0 tool marks, no chisel gouges, no sanding grooves. Are we honestly supposed to believe they achieved laser-level precision on a 100-ton box in a dark cave using pounding stones and copper hand chisels?
Well, copper is vastly softer than granite. It would just bend.
Right. So how on earth do you do it?
It completely strains credulity. The Tartaria theory proposed in our document suggests that these builders possessed a fundamentally different paradigm of physics. They had a way to, as the text poetically puts it, talk to the hardest materials on Earth.
Okay, but what does that actually mean, functionally? How do you talk to a rock?
The text hypothesized the use of resonant frequencies and acoustics.
Acoustics,
Yep.
like sound.
Yes. Instead of using kinetic energy, brute force, striking a chisel with a hammer to break the stone, they theorized the use of specific sound waves to manipulate the molecular bonds of the granite.
Okay, wait, kind of like how a trained opera singer can hit a very specific high-pitched note and cause a crystal wine glass across the room to completely shatter without ever touching it.
Because the sound wave perfectly matches the resonant frequency of the glass.
Yes, it's
Good.
mind-blowing.
But applied with far more sophistication, instead of just shattering the material, the theory suggests they could use acoustic frequencies to temporarily weaken the molecular structure.
So they were basically softening the stone.
Essentially, yes. Softening it so it could be scooped, shaped, or smoothed like clay before allowing it to reharden. It explains the perfect hair-width precision and the absolute absence of mechanical tool marks.
That implies a completely different relationship with nature. But this raises a massive logistical question for me.
What's that?
If they had the industrial capacity to cut 100-ton stones with hair-width precision on the surface, and if they were digging thousands of miles of deep canals, where did all the millions of tons of excavated earth and rock go?
That is the million-dollar question, and that leads us directly into the next major revelation in the source material.
Okay.
The surface world we see, the pyramids, the walls, the sprawling canals, the texts argue that this is just the top half of the story.
Meaning they built downward.
Deep downward. And we aren't talking about crude root cellars, simple mines, or rough caves. Look at the Quinta da Regalera in Portugal.
Wait, I'm actually not familiar with that one. What is it?
It's an estate that features what are commonly called the initiation wells, but calling them wells is entirely misleading.
Why? What are they?
They are actually deeply intricate inverted towers that plunge 9 levels deep directly into solid bedrock.
9 levels.
Yes, and the architecture features beautifully carved spiral staircases, ornate archways, and complex Masonic and Templar symbolism. It is a highly sophisticated, deliberate, and opulent descent into the earth.
Oh, wow. So they're essentially building 9-story subterranean skyscrapers.
Basically, yes.
But if they were doing that in Portugal, what else is hiding beneath the surface of these old cities? Because our sources claim they didn't just dig empty tunnels, right? They filled those tunnels with a form of transit that sounds like pure science fiction.
Right, the pneumatic transit systems.
Yes. Okay, if you've ever been to a bank drive-thru, you know those little clear plastic tubes. You put your check in the capsule, shove it in the pipe, a vacuum kicks on, and it violently sucks the tube right into the bank.
We've all seen those, yeah.
Now, imagine scaling that exact physics model up for human commuters. Here's where it gets really interesting. They essentially treated air as an invisible locomotive.
Exactly. The source material references a series of incredibly detailed cross-sections and patents. One fascinating example is a diagram of London's Piccadilly Tube Station.
Okay.
It reveals a staggeringly complex pneumatic transit system, complete with valves and pressure chambers, and it is dated 1870.
1870, decades before the Wright brothers even flew.
Exactly. The concept was that passengers would sit in comfortable cylindrical carriages inside these tight-fitting tunnels. Massive fans or compressors would create a vacuum in front of the carriage while simultaneously pumping high-pressure air behind it.
And the sources say they moved as fast as a modern sailboat. No bumpy tracks, no steam engines, just a smooth, frictionless ride pushed quietly through a tunnel by a localized hurricane.
It's brilliant engineering.
But it wasn't just London. The texts focus heavily on Washington, D.C. as well, mentioning a network they called the Moleway.
Right, the Moleway is a perfect example of this lost infrastructure. According to the documents, D.C. allegedly had an 87-station pneumatic network functioning beneath the city.
87 stations.
Yes, connecting the White House, the Capitol building, and the local markets.
Think about that scale. 87 stations is a more extensive layout than the modern D.C. metro system has in its immediate downtown core today.
It's massive.
And the sources note they used elaborate spiral staircases to access these deep underground stations because the escalator hadn't even been invented yet. But here is where I have to push back on the sources a bit.
Let's hear it.
If Washington, D.C. had 87 operational pneumatic transit stations in the Victorian era, why haven't I ever seen one of these giant passenger capsules sitting in the Smithsonian? Where did all this massive physical infrastructure go?
It's the critical question. The Tartaria theory presented in the text addresses this by proposing a massive, relatively recent cataclysm, often referred to as a mud flood, or a deliberate, coordinated burial of this old-world technology by the factions that inherited the cities.
A deliberate burial.
Yeah, the argument is that the tunnels themselves still exist and were simply retrofitted later for modern subway trains. Meanwhile, the pneumatic technology was scrapped because it couldn't be easily monetized or metered in the same way as coal and oil.
Oh, wow. So they essentially buried the evidence of a superior system.
That's the theory.
Because when you think about it, utilizing atmospheric pressure as your primary engine is brilliantly elegant. To them, air wasn't just for breathing. It was invisible labor.
Completely clean energy.
Right. No toxic exhaust fumes choking the tunnels, no massive, heavy diesel engines to maintain. They were just harnessing the sheer ambient power of air pressure to move massive amounts of weight silently beneath the earth.
So, if we take a step back and synthesize all of the mechanisms we've discussed today, what becomes truly fascinating is the overarching pattern.
Yeah, let's pull it all together.
If we follow the logic of these sources, this wasn't just a series of random, isolated building projects scattered across different centuries and continents. It was a single, massive, integrated system of planetary engineering.
A completely unified grid.
Exactly. They utilized telluric currents and canals to control the water. They built monumental boundary lines like the Great Wall to enclose the Earth.
And they utilized acoustic resonance to master the hardest stone on the planet.
Right, and they excavated inverted towers to conquer the depth of the bedrock. And finally, they harnessed pneumatic pressure to control the air itself.
Earth, water, stone, depth, and air. They weren't just building on the board, they were mastering the board itself.
It represents a truly holistic approach to physics. They viewed the entire Earth as a dynamic canvas. They seem to have understood the underlying natural forces, the electromagnetic properties of mineral water, the acoustic vulnerability of granite, and the kinetic energy of compressed air, in ways that our modern science is perhaps only just beginning to rediscover.
So wrapping this all up for you listening, impossible engineering, at least as it's framed in these texts, isn't about magic.
No, not at all.
It's not a theory about aliens dropping down from the sky to stack some heavy blocks.
Yeah.
It's about a highly advanced, internally consistent system of lost knowledge.
Precisely.
Whether you fully buy into the Tartaria theory or not, these sources force us to ask some very uncomfortable questions about the linear narrative of history. We're taught that human progress is just a straight line upwards, right?
Yeah.
That we are at the absolute apex of intelligence right now.
But these documents challenge that assumption. They ask us to consider the very real possibility that knowledge isn't just accumulated, it can be entirely lost. A wholly different paradigm of physics, a way of working in harmony with the Earth's natural forces rather than just burning fossil fuels to fight against it, could have been completely forgotten. Or, as the text suggests, deliberately buried.
Which leaves us with one final, kind of haunting thought to ponder on your own. We've spent this entire deep dive analyzing the brute mechanics of this lost world. We've talked about the caloric nightmare of digging 363 miles of rock, the acoustics required to melt 100-ton granite boxes, and the physics of pushing human beings through tunnels with atmospheric vacuums.
The macro-industrial mechanics of the empire.
Right. But think back to that feeling we talked about at the very beginning, standing in front of that massive ancient monument, feeling small. If this alleged lost civilization could engineer the Earth with such effortless, grand-scale perfection, what did the inside of their daily lives actually look like?
That is the ultimate blind spot in the historical record. We just don't know.
Exactly. Were they living in cold, utilitarian environments, just surrounded by bare stone, roaring air pipes, and the hum of magnetic canals? Or, if they truly possessed this level of absolute mastery over the elements of nature, were the interiors of these impossible structures filled with an unimaginable, opulent beauty that we can't even fathom today? Next time you find yourself looking at a perfectly carved ancient wall, don't just wonder how they moved it. Ask yourself, if this incredible feat of engineering is just the outside, what on earth did the inside look like?